What happens when humanity's greatest protector arrives on Earth, armed with advanced technology, superior intellect, and an unbreakable mission to safeguard our species, but there's just one tiny problem? They can't stop finding everything we do absolutely hilarious. Imagine being saved by someone who bursts into laughter every time you try to be serious. Picture a guardian who snorts with amusement when you attempt to show gratitude. Envision a protector so powerful they could reshape reality itself, yet they're doubled over in stitches because humans invented something called pizza with pineapple. This is the story of Zara 9, an elite guardian from the Cosmic Protection Alliance, sent to Earth during humanity's darkest hour. Armed with technology that makes our wildest science fiction look like cave paintings, Zara 9 was meant to be our silent, efficient protector. Instead, they became something far more unexpected, our biggest fan. From the moment Zara 9 materialized in downtown New York and witnessed a businessman arguing with a hot dog vendor about mustard choices, everything went sideways. Not the mission, oh no, the mission went perfectly. It was Zara 9's composure that completely fell apart. You see, in all of Zara 9's extensive training across 17 different galaxies, studying countless civilizations and their survival patterns, nobody had prepared them for the absolute comedy goldmine that is human behavior. The way humans panic about things that don't matter, then ignore things that could kill them. How they'll spend hours debating which coffee shop has the best vibe while actual meteors hurtle toward their planet. But here's the thing about laughter, it's contagious. And when your protector finds you endlessly entertaining, something magical happens. Instead of feeling small and helpless, humanity began to see itself through Zara 9's eyes. Through their laughter, we discovered something incredible: our chaos isn't a weakness. Our unpredictability isn't a flaw. Our beautiful, messy, ridiculous humanity might just be the most powerful force in the universe. This is the story of how Earth gained a guardian who was supposed to protect us in secret, but couldn't keep quiet about how absolutely amazing humans are. It's about the unexpected friendship between a cosmic warrior and a species that thinks arguing about toilet paper orientation is a valid use of time. Most importantly, it's about how sometimes the best way to save someone isn't to shield them from who they are, but to help them fall in love with it. Get ready for a tale where saving the world involves a lot more giggling than anyone expected. The morning Zara 9 arrived on Earth started like any other Tuesday in New York City. Coffee shops buzzed with the usual pre-work chaos, subway trains screeched through tunnels packed with sleepy commuters, and street vendors prepared for another day of selling overpriced hot dogs to tourists who somehow thought $4 for a sausage and a bun was reasonable. What made this Tuesday different was the shimmer. It appeared first as a barely visible ripple in the air above Times Square, like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. Most humans walked past without noticing, too busy staring at their phones or arguing about whether the Yankees had any chance this season. But a few looked up, squinted, and wondered if they needed new glasses. The shimmer grew stronger, pulsing with colors that didn't quite exist in Earth's spectrum. Then, with a sound like someone gently tearing silk, reality opened up and Zara 9 stepped through. Zara 9 stood 7 feet tall, with skin that seemed to shift between deep blue and silver depending on the angle of light. Their eyes held the depth of ancient stars, and their movements carried the fluid grace of someone who had mastered combat techniques across 1,000 worlds. They wore what appeared to be a simple gray uniform, but the fabric rippled with embedded technology that could analyze threats, deflect energy weapons, and probably fold spacetime if needed. According to their mission briefing, Earth was in danger. A rogue asteroid, larger than the one that killed the dinosaurs, was hurtling toward the planet on a collision course that would arrive in exactly 72 hours. The Cosmic Protection Alliance had detected it 3 months ago, and, after extensive deliberation, they'd decided humanity was worth saving. Barely. Zara 9's job was simple: arrive, assess the threat, deploy the necessary technology to redirect the asteroid, and leave. Total time on planet, estimated 4 hours maximum. The operation required discretion, efficiency, and zero interaction with the local population. That plan lasted approximately 37 seconds. The first thing that caught Zara 9's attention was a businessman in an expensive suit standing in front of a hot dog cart, red-faced and gesticulating wildly at the vendor. "I specifically said no mustard," the businessman shouted. "Do you see mustard on this hot dog?" Because I see mustard on this hot dog, and I very clearly stated no mustard. The vendor, a weathered man in his 60s with the patience of someone who'd dealt with 40 years of New York attitudes, calmly replied, "Sir, you said everything on it. Everything includes mustard. When I say everything, I mean everything except mustard. That's implied." "How is that implied?" "Because mustard is disgusting. Nobody wants mustard." At this point, a woman waiting behind the businessman interjected, "I want mustard. I specifically come here for the mustard." The businessman spun around. "Well, you have terrible taste. You have a terrible attitude. You have terrible hair. At least I have hair." Zara 9 stood frozen, watching this exchange with the wide-eyed fascination of an anthropologist discovering a completely new species. In all their training, across 17 galaxies and 43 different civilizations, they had never witnessed anything quite like this. Here was a species facing extinction in 3 days, and they were engaged in passionate combat over condiment preferences? A small sound escaped Zara 9's throat. A sort of snort. The argument escalated when the woman behind the businessman called over her friend, "Janet, get over here. Tell this man that mustard is a perfectly reasonable condiment." Janet, a woman in her 40s wearing a shirt that said "World's Okayest Mom," approached the cart with the weary expression of someone who'd been through too many subway delays. "What's the problem?" "This man," the first woman pointed dramatically, "thinks mustard is disgusting." Janet studied the businessman for a moment, then turned to the vendor. "1 hot dog, extra mustard, please." The businessman threw his hands up in defeat. "I'm surrounded by barbarians." This time, Zara 9 couldn't contain it. A laugh bubbled up from deep within them, starting as a chuckle and building into full-blown mirth. The sound was like wind chimes mixed with the distant harmony of cosmic radiation, and it was loud enough that everyone within 50 feet turned to look. The businessman, the 2 women, the hot dog vendor, and about 30 other humans all stared at Zara 9. This was the moment when the Cosmic Protection Alliance's carefully planned covert operation should have ended before it began. Zara 9 should have activated their perception filter, made themselves invisible, and continued with the mission. Instead, they kept laughing. "Oh," Zara 9 gasped between chuckles, "oh, this is magnificent. You're about to be wiped out by a cosmic catastrophe, and you're debating sauce preferences. This is the best thing I've seen in 3 centuries. The businessman blinked. "Wiped out by what now?" Zara 9 stopped laughing abruptly, realizing they just violated about 16 different Alliance protocols. Nothing. Forget I said anything." But it was too late. The crowd that had gathered was now very interested in the 7-foot-tall, blue-skinned stranger who'd just mentioned cosmic catastrophes. Janet stepped forward, still holding her mustard-covered hot dog. "Excuse me, but did you just say we're about to be wiped out?" "No," Zara 9 said quickly. "I said, you're about to be typed out? Because you're all very wordy?" The hot dog vendor leaned over his cart. "Friend, you don't look like you're from around here." This was an understatement of galactic proportions, but Zara 9 tried to play it off. "I'm from Canada." "Canada, huh?" The vendor grinned. "Which part?" Zara 9 panicked and said the first thing that came to mind, "The northern part?" "That's most of Canada, buddy." The businessman, apparently forgetting his mustard crisis, joined the interrogation. "And where exactly in northern Canada do people grow to be 7 feet tall and blue?" "It's very cold there," Zara 9 explained desperately. "The cold makes you tall and blue." A small girl who'd been watching the whole scene with the intense focus of a 6-year-old tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, why is the blue person lying about being from Canada?" Her mother shushed her, but the damage was done. The crowd was now actively suspicious, and Zara 9 was beginning to understand why the Alliance usually sent robots for these missions. That's when the second businessman appeared. This one was different from the first. Where the mustard hater was red-faced and flustered, this new arrival was calm, composed, and wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. He walked straight up to Zara 9 with the confidence of someone who owned half of Manhattan. "Excuse me," he said in a voice smooth as expensive whiskey, "but I couldn't help overhearing your comment about cosmic catastrophes. I represent certain interests that would be very eager to hear more about such things." Zara 9's internal threat assessment system immediately started flashing warnings. This human radiated the kind of dangerous ambition that the Alliance had warned about. This was exactly the type of person who would try to exploit advanced technology for personal gain. "I don't know what you're talking about," Zara 9 replied carefully. The businessman smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "My name is Marcus Reed. Perhaps you've heard of Reed Industries?" Zara 9 hadn't, but the way several people in the crowd muttered and stepped back suggested this was significant. "Mr. Reed," Janet said, still holding her hot dog, "this person is obviously just confused. Maybe jet-lagged from their trip from northern Canada." Reed ignored her, keeping his focus on Zara 9. "I make it my business to know about unusual phenomena. And you, my tall blue friend, are definitely unusual. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with me, and we're going to have a conversation about cosmic catastrophes and how my company might profit from advanced knowledge of such things." The crowd had grown larger, and Zara 9 could see phones being pulled out, cameras being aimed in their direction. This situation was deteriorating rapidly. Soon, images would be spreading across social media, government agencies would get involved, and the entire mission would be compromised. Zara 9 needed to extract themselves from this situation immediately. They had several options: deploy a memory wipe field that would make everyone forget the last 10 minutes, activate their personal teleportation device and disappear, or use their combat training to incapacitate Reed and escape in the confusion. What they actually did was start laughing again. Because Reed had just made the mistake of stepping closer to the hot dog cart, and, in his attempt to intimidate Zara 9, he'd backed directly into the businessman who was still holding his mustard-covered hot dog. The collision sent the hot dog flying, and it landed with perfect accuracy directly on Reed's expensive suit jacket, leaving a yellow mustard stain right over his left pocket. "My suit!" Reed exclaimed, looking down in horror. "This jacket costs $8,000. The original businessman threw his hands up again. "See? This is why mustard is evil. It attacks innocent clothing. Your hot dog attacked my suit. Hot dogs don't attack people. Hot dogs are peaceful. Tell that to my jacket." Janet took another bite of her mustard-covered hot dog and grinned. "I love this city." Zara 9 was now laughing so hard they were having trouble breathing. The situation had gone from serious threat assessment to complete farce in under 30 seconds, and they couldn't help but admire the beautiful chaos of it all. That's when the police sirens started wailing in the distance. Someone in the crowd had apparently decided that a 7-foot-tall blue person laughing about cosmic catastrophes while two businessmen fought over mustard was worth calling the authorities. The sirens were getting closer, and Zara 9 realized they had about 90 seconds before this situation became completely unmanageable. "I have to go," Zara 9 announced, trying to compose themselves. "Wait," the little girl called out. "Are we really in danger from space?" Zara 9 looked down at her, and something in those wide, curious eyes made them pause. Here was a member of the species they'd been sent to protect, asking a direct question about their safety. According to protocol, Zara 9 should lie, deflect, or simply disappear. But, looking at this small human, surrounded by adults who were more concerned with mustard preferences and expensive suits than actual threats to their survival, Zara 9 felt something they'd never experienced before. Protective affection mixed with profound amusement. "Don't worry," Zara 9 said gently. "Someone's looking out for you." The little girl smiled. "Is it you?" Before Zara 9 could answer, the police cars rounded the corner, sirens blaring. Reed was frantically trying to clean mustard off his jacket while simultaneously barking orders into his phone. The hot dog vendor was attempting to restore order to his cart while the two businessmen continued their condiment-based philosophical debate. "I really have to go now," Zara 9 said, backing toward the alley where they'd originally materialized. "Wait!" Janet called out. "What's your name?" Zara, they replied without thinking. Nice to meet you, Zara from Northern Canada. Try the mustard next time. As Zara 9 ducked into the alley and activated their personal camouflage field, becoming invisible to human eyes, they could still hear the chaos continuing behind them. The police had arrived and were trying to figure out what had happened. Reed was demanding they search for a 7-foot-tall blue person. The businessmen were explaining the Great Mustard incident of Tuesday morning. Janet was finishing her hot dog and offering running commentary on the whole situation. And, through it all, Zara 9 could hear the little girl asking her mother, "Do you think Zara will save us from the space danger?" Standing invisible in that alley, listening to the beautiful, ridiculous symphony of human chaos, Zara 9 made a decision that would change everything. Instead of completing their mission quickly and efficiently as planned, they were going to take some time to really observe these humans. After all, they had 71 hours and 23 minutes before the asteroid arrived. Surely they could spare a few hours to understand exactly what made this species so magnificently, hilariously worth saving. What Zara 9 didn't realize was that those few hours would stretch into the most entertaining, bewildering, and ultimately enlightening experience of their very long life. They were about to discover that protecting humanity wasn't just about stopping asteroids, it was about understanding why a species that could create poetry and music and art could also spend 20 minutes arguing about condiments. And, somewhere in that understanding, Zara 9 would find something they'd never expected, a reason to stay. Zara 9 spent the next 6 hours in invisible observation mode, following various humans around New York City in an attempt to understand their behavioral patterns. What they discovered challenged every assumption they'd made about intelligent life. Their first subject was Martha, a 43-year-old accountant who lived in Queens and commuted to Manhattan every day. Zara 9 watched Martha wake up, shower, and spend 37 minutes standing in front of her closet debating between two nearly identical black blazers. The decision process involved holding each blazer up to herself, checking the weather app on her phone, calling her sister for advice, and, finally, choosing based on which one felt more Tuesday-ish. Zara 9 had witnessed civilizations make decisions about interplanetary war in less time. Martha then spent 14 minutes making coffee using a machine that appeared to cost more than some small spacecraft, grinding beans with the precision of someone performing surgery, and measuring water temperature to the exact degree. But, when she realized she was running late, she grabbed a different cup of coffee from a street vendor that cost $3 and probably hadn't been cleaned since the previous geological era. As Zara 9 followed Martha onto the subway, they observed the intricate social dynamics of human public transportation. People squeezed into metal tubes with strangers, maintaining careful distances and avoiding eye contact while simultaneously being pressed together closer than most species would tolerate outside of mating rituals. Everyone pretended not to notice when someone's phone conversation got personal, but they all listened intently when a man spent 10 minutes loudly explaining to someone named Kevin why pineapple on pizza was a crime against Italian culture. The pizza debate triggered something Zara 9 had started to recognize as distinctly human, the ability to have passionate opinions about completely subjective matters and argue about them as if they were universal truths. A woman across the aisle immediately jumped into the conversation. "Pineapple on pizza is delicious. It's sweet and savory." "Sweet and savory don't belong together," the man replied. "What about honey glazed ham?" "That's different." "How is that different?" "Because ham is meat." "So you're saying the problem isn't sweet and savory, the problem is fruit?" "Yes. Fruit doesn't go on pizza." "What about tomatoes?" The man paused. "Tomatoes don't count. Tomatoes are literally fruit. They're vegetables. Scientifically, they're fruit. Culinary-wise, they're vegetables." Zara 9 watched this exchange with fascination. Here were two humans who had never met before, debating the classification of produce with the intensity of cosmic philosophers discussing the nature of existence. And the rest of the subway car was clearly invested in the outcome, with people taking sides and muttering agreement or disagreement under their breath. When the train reached Martha's stop, she exited still shaking her head and mumbling, "Of course tomatoes are fruit, any idiot knows that." Zara 9 followed Martha to her office building, where they observed the ritual known as waiting for the elevator. 12 humans stood in front of metal doors, and, when the elevator arrived, they performed an elaborate dance of politeness. Everyone insisted everyone else go first, then, they all tried to enter simultaneously, creating a brief traffic jam of courtesy. Inside the elevator, Martha pressed the button for the 15th floor, even though someone had already pressed it and it was clearly illuminated. When Zara 9 scanned the elevator's simple control system, they realized that humans seemed to believe that pressing an already activated button would somehow make it work better. At Martha's office, Zara 9 discovered the mysterious phenomenon of work. Martha sat at a desk with a computer and spent 8 hours moving information from one digital location to another, occasionally stopping to attend meetings where groups of humans sat around tables and spoke in a language that sounded like English but made no logical sense. "We need to circle back on the deliverables and make sure we're optimizing our bandwidth for maximum synergy," said a man in a tie that was apparently strangling him. "Absolutely," Martha nodded. "We should definitely leverage our core competencies to drive innovation." "I agree," said another woman. "Let's take this offline and ideate some solutions." Zara 9's translation software, which could handle over 10,000 languages and dialects, registered these as English words but couldn't determine their actual meaning. The humans seemed to understand each other, though, nodding seriously and making notes on tablets. After the meeting, Martha returned to her desk and immediately opened a different application where she sent a message to her friend Lisa that meeting was complete nonsense. "I have no idea what we're supposed to be doing." Lisa replied, "Same. Want to get lunch?" This led Zara 9 to their second major discovery about humans. They had two completely different communication systems. There was the formal system they used in professional settings, which seemed designed to convey as little actual information as possible, and the informal system they used with people they trusted, which was direct and efficient. During lunch, Martha and Lisa sat in a restaurant and engaged in a behavior Zara 9 found endlessly entertaining. They spent 45 minutes discussing the personal lives of people who weren't present. This wasn't malicious intelligence gathering, as Zara 9 initially assumed, but rather a complex social bonding ritual. "Did you hear about Jennifer from HR?" Martha asked. "No, what happened?" "She's dating that guy from accounting." "Which guy from accounting?" "The tall one with the weird laugh." "Oh, him." "Really?" "Really. They were holding hands in the lobby yesterday." "Good for her. He seems nice." "He does seem nice. And he brings his own lunch every day, which shows planning skills." "Planning skills are attractive." "Very attractive." Zara 9 realized they were witnessing humans use romance as a way to assess character traits. The ability to prepare meals in advance was apparently considered a positive indicator of overall life competence. This seemed both arbitrary and oddly practical. After lunch, Zara 9 decided to follow Lisa instead of Martha, curious to see if different humans exhibited the same puzzling behaviors. Lisa worked in marketing, which appeared to involve creating messages designed to make humans want things they didn't know they wanted. Lisa spent her afternoon working on an advertisement for a product called artisanal water. As far as Zara 9 could determine, this was regular water that cost 20 times more than regular water because it came in a prettier bottle and had a story about being sourced from a specific mountain spring. The fascinating part wasn't that someone was selling expensive water. The fascinating part was that humans were buying it. Zara 9 watched Lisa craft carefully worded descriptions designed to make people feel sophisticated for choosing one form of hydrogen and oxygen molecules over another identical form. The psychology was complex and brilliant. Humans weren't just buying water, they were buying the feeling of making a refined choice. At the end of the workday, Zara 9 followed Lisa onto another subway train, where they witnessed the evening commute ritual. This was different from the morning commute. People were more relaxed, more talkative, more willing to make eye contact. The social barriers that existed in the morning had dissolved somewhat. A musician got on the train with a guitar and started playing. Some humans put money in his case, others ignored him completely, and a few sang along. Zara 9 watched a businessman in an expensive suit put $1 in the guitar case while humming along to a song he clearly knew by heart. When the musician finished, the businessman applauded with genuine enthusiasm. This was the same species that had spent an hour that morning debating pizza toppings with philosophical intensity. Lisa got off at her stop and walked home through a neighborhood where Zara 9 observed the evening's social rituals. Humans emerged from buildings to walk small domesticated animals. The animals appeared to serve no practical function, they weren't used for transportation, food, or protection. Instead, humans had voluntarily taken on the responsibility of caring for creatures whose primary skills were being adorable and requiring constant attention. Zara 9 watched Lisa greet her neighbor, an elderly man walking a dog that was approximately the size of a large rat. "Evening, Mr. Peterson. How's Chester doing?" "Oh, he's wonderful. He learned a new trick today." "Really? What trick?" Mr. Peterson beamed with pride. "He can sit on command." Lisa clapped her hands together. "That's amazing. Chester, you're such a good boy." The tiny dog wagged its tail with the enthusiasm of someone who had just solved faster than light travel. Zara 9 found themselves smiling. These humans had developed emotional attachments to creatures that couldn't contribute to their survival, couldn't help with work, and required significant resources to maintain. The relationship existed purely because both species enjoyed each other's company. It was completely illogical and absolutely beautiful. As Lisa entered her apartment building, Zara 9 decided to expand their observation to include a different demographic. They found a nearby coffee shop that was still open and positioned themselves where they could observe the evening social behaviors of humans in their 20s and 30s. The coffee shop was fascinating. Humans came there ostensibly to consume caffeinated beverages, but they actually seemed to be there for social interaction. Groups of friends sat around small tables, talking intensely about topics ranging from their jobs to their relationships to their theories about which celebrities were secretly aliens. Zara 9 eavesdropped on multiple conversations simultaneously, thanks to their enhanced hearing, and discovered that humans had an extraordinary capacity for multitasking emotionally. A woman named Sarah was simultaneously comforting a friend whose relationship had ended, planning a birthday party for her sister, and expressing opinions about a television show featuring dragons and political intrigue. "I'm telling you," Sarah said while rubbing her friend's shoulder, "you're better off without him. And, yes, we should definitely do the party at that place with the good appetizers. Also, if they kill off the Dragon Queen, I'm going to write angry letters to the network." Her friend, who was crying about her breakup, still engaged with the television discussion. "They can't kill her. She's the whole show." "Exactly. And, speaking of the party, should we do a theme?" "What kind of theme?" "I don't know, maybe something fun." "Oh, and you should definitely block his number." "I already blocked his number." "What about a costume party?" "Yes. Costume party. You could dress up as the Dragon Queen. That would be amazing. I would look great with silver hair." Zara 9 marveled at this ability to process multiple emotional threads simultaneously while making practical decisions and engaging in fictional scenarios. No other species they'd encountered could maintain that level of cognitive and emotional complexity while drinking beverages that contained enough stimulants to power a small spacecraft. As the evening progressed, Zara 9 observed the coffee shop's closing ritual. Humans gathered their belongings, said elaborate goodbyes that included promises to text each other later, and then immediately began texting each other as soon as they were outside the building. The texts weren't about anything urgent or important. They were continuations of conversations that had just ended, sharing of random thoughts that occurred during the walk home, and photos of interesting things they'd seen in the last 10 minutes. Zara 9 followed a group of 3 friends as they walked down the street, all looking at their phones, all texting people who weren't there, occasionally stopping to show each other something funny they'd found on the internet. "Look at this video of a cat that thinks it's a dog," said one friend. "Oh my god, it's trying to fetch." "That's adorable," said another. "I'm sending this to my mom. She loves weird animal videos," said the third. They spent 5 minutes gathered around a phone screen, laughing at footage of a confused cat, then continued walking while immediately searching for more animal videos to share. This led to Zara 9's third major discovery about humans. they had created a global communication network that they primarily used to share amusing content about domesticated animals. The technological achievement was staggering. Humans had figured out how to send information instantly across vast distances, connecting every person on the planet in a web of instantaneous communication. And they used this miracle of engineering to distribute pictures of cats wearing tiny hats. It was simultaneously the most advanced and most ridiculous use of technology Zara 9 had ever witnessed. As the night deepened, Zara 9 realized they had learned more about human nature in 8 hours than their entire briefing had covered. Humans weren't just a species facing extinction, they were a species that had somehow managed to create meaning, joy, and connection in the midst of chaos. They argued about condiments with passion, cared for useless animals with devotion, and used miraculous technology to make each other laugh. They were inefficient, illogical, emotionally driven, and completely magnificent. Standing invisible on a street corner in Manhattan, watching the last few humans of the evening hurry home to their families, their pets, and their collections of amusing internet videos, Zara 9 felt something they'd never experienced before, a fierce determination to protect not just human lives, but human absurdity. These people deserved to continue having passionate debates about pizza toppings. They deserved to keep training tiny dogs to sit on command. They deserved to maintain their beautiful, chaotic, completely irrational way of being alive. The asteroid was arriving in 65 hours and 14 minutes. Zara 9 had plenty of time to save the planet. But, first, they wanted to understand what exactly they were saving it for. Tomorrow, they decided, they would dig deeper into human culture. They would explore the places where humans gathered to share stories, create art, and engage in the competitive activities they called sports. They would try to understand how a species that could spend an hour debating water preferences had also managed to split atoms and reach for the stars. Most importantly, they would try to figure out why watching these humans navigate their daily lives was the most entertaining thing that had happened to them in 300 years of cosmic service. The next morning, Zara 9 decided to investigate something their preliminary research had identified as a significant aspect of human culture: organized recreational conflict, also known as sports. Their analysis suggested that humans gathered in large groups to watch other humans engage in elaborate competitions with arbitrary rules and intense emotional investment. Their first stop was Central Park, where they discovered humans engaging in individual physical activities. Some ran in circles for no apparent practical purpose, others performed repetitive exercises that seemed designed to simulate useful work without actually accomplishing anything, and a few engaged in an activity called yoga that appeared to be competitive stretching. Zara 9 watched a woman named Diana attempt to balance on one leg while twisting her body into shapes that defied comfortable anatomy. Diana was sweating profusely and breathing heavily, clearly exerting significant effort to maintain these positions. When she finally relaxed, she looked peaceful and satisfied. "Excuse me," Diana said, looking directly at Zara 9. Zara 9 froze. Their camouflage field was supposed to be perfect. No human should have been able to see them. "I don't mean to be rude," Diana continued, "but you've been standing there watching people exercise for an hour, and you're kind of making everyone nervous." Zara 9 looked around and realized that several other humans were glancing in their direction with concerned expressions. Somehow, despite being technically invisible, their presence was still being detected. "I can see you're trying to be sneaky," Diana said with a gentle smile, "but you're about 7 feet tall and you keep making amused snorting sounds when people fall over. Maybe try participating instead of just watching?" Zara 9's camouflage field was apparently not designed to account for involuntary laughter. They deactivated it and materialized fully, causing several joggers to stop and stare. "There you are," Diana said cheerfully. "Much better. I'm Diana. Are you interested in trying yoga?" "I'm Zara," they replied, still amazed at being detected. "And I'm not sure I understand the purpose of yoga." "The purpose is to feel better," Diana explained. "Physical exercise, mental relaxation, spiritual connection. Plus, it's really hard, which makes it satisfying when you get it right." This was Zara 9's first introduction to a distinctly human concept, deliberately choosing difficult activities for the pleasure of overcoming the difficulty. In their experience, most species try to make life easier. Humans seem to actively seek out challenges purely for entertainment. Would you like to try? Diana offered. Before Zara 9 could explain that they were on a critical mission to save the planet, they found themselves agreeing. Something about Diana's genuine enthusiasm was impossible to resist. The next 30 minutes were among the most humbling of Zara 9's existence. Despite being trained in combat techniques from 17 galaxies, they could not master the simple human art of downward-facing dog. Their legs were too long, their balance was wrong, and every position Diana demonstrated with graceful ease turned into an awkward tangle of limbs when Zara 9 attempted it. "Don't worry," Diana said encouragingly as Zara 9 toppled over for the 6th time. "Everyone's body is different. The important thing is trying." "But, I'm failing at every position," Zara 9 protested. "You're not failing, you're learning. Failure implies you're supposed to be perfect immediately. Learning means you're supposed to get better gradually." This was a profound philosophical distinction that Zara 9 had never considered. In Alliance culture, you either succeeded at a task or you didn't. The concept of deliberate practice, of enjoying the process of gradual improvement, was foreign and fascinating. By the end of the session, Zara 9 had managed exactly one yoga position correctly, lying flat on their back with their eyes closed, which Diana informed them was called corpse pose. "That's actually the most important pose," Diana said seriously. "It looks easy, but learning to truly relax is one of the hardest things humans do." As Zara 9 lay there, focusing on the sensation of simply existing without doing anything, they began to understand something crucial about human nature. These people didn't just seek physical challenges, they actively pursued mental and emotional difficulties as well. They created elaborate systems for testing themselves, not because they needed to prove anything to anyone else, but because the process of striving made them feel more fully alive. After yoga, Zara 9 decided to investigate team sports. Diana had mentioned that there was a baseball game happening in the park, and she offered to explain the rules as they walked over. "So the basic idea is that one team tries to hit a ball with a stick, and the other team tries to catch the ball," Diana began. "If you hit the ball and run around 4 bases without getting caught, your team gets a point." "That sounds simple enough," Zara 9 said. Diana laughed. "Oh, it gets much more complicated than that. There are 9 innings, 3 strikes, for balls, steal bases, sacrifice flies, double plays, and about 1,000 unwritten rules that everyone just knows but nobody officially teaches." They arrived at the baseball field where 2 teams of humans in matching uniforms were engaged in what appeared to be ritualized warfare. But, instead of fighting over territory or resources, they were competing for the right to say they were better at hitting a small leather sphere with a wooden club. The complexity was staggering. Zara 9 watched players communicate through elaborate hand signals, adjust their positions based on subtle environmental factors, and execute strategies that required split-second timing and perfect coordination. The level of skill involved was actually quite impressive. What was even more impressive was the audience. Hundreds of humans had gathered to watch this competition, and they were emotionally invested in the outcome to a degree that baffled Zara 9. When their preferred team succeeded, they cheered with genuine joy. When the opposing team succeeded, they groaned as if personally injured. They debated the decisions made by the team leaders with the intensity of military strategists, and they had strong opinions about the performance of individual players they had never met. "Why do you care so much about the outcome?" Zara 9 asked Diana, who was shouting encouragement at a player named Rodriguez. "Because they're our team," Diana explained, as if this answered everything. "But, you don't know these people personally." "That doesn't matter. When you choose a team, they become part of your identity. Their victories are your victories. Their failures are your failures. It's about belonging to something bigger than yourself." Zara 9 found this concept fascinating. Humans had created artificial tribal connections based on shared enthusiasm for groups of strangers engaged in arbitrary competitions. And these connections generated real emotional responses, genuine community bonds, and lasting friendships. A man sitting nearby overheard their conversation and leaned over. "First baseball game?" he asked Zara 9. "Yes, I'm still learning the rules." "Don't worry about the rules," the man said seriously. Baseball isn't about rules. Baseball is about hope. Hope? Every at-bat could be the one that changes everything. Every pitch could be the perfect strike or the game-winning home run. Every inning starts with infinite possibility. That's why we watch. Not because we understand everything that's happening, but because we want to witness the moment when something amazing becomes real. As if summoned by this speech, Rodriguez swung his bat and connected with the ball with a sharp crack that echoed across the field. The ball sailed high and far, and the crowd rose to their feet, tracking its trajectory with collective breath held. It cleared the outfield fence by inches, and the entire stadium erupted in celebration. Zara9 watched hundreds of humans hug strangers, high-five anyone within reach, and cheer until their voices cracked. All because one person had successfully hit a ball over a fence. The joy was infectious, irrational, and absolutely beautiful. "Did you see that?" Diana shouted over the noise. "Did you see that beautiful swing?" Zara9 had seen it, but, more importantly, they had felt it. Something about the collective human hope being rewarded with success had triggered an emotional response they didn't fully understand. They found themselves grinning and nodding enthusiastically. That was magnificent. Zara9 replied, and meant it. After the baseball game, Diana invited Zara9 to join her and some friends at an art museum. "Since you seem interested in understanding human culture," she said, "you should see what happens when we try to make beautiful things instead of competitive things." The museum was a revelation. Humans had taken materials from their environment, paint, stone, metal, fabric, and transformed them into objects that served no practical purpose except to be looked at and appreciated. Some pieces were realistic representations of people and places. Others were abstract arrangements of color and form that somehow conveyed emotions or ideas without depicting anything specific. Zara9 stood in front of a painting that consisted entirely of blue rectangles of slightly different shades, trying to understand why humans had decided this deserved to be preserved and displayed. "What do you think?" asked James, one of Diana's friends who had joined them at the museum. "I'm not sure I understand what I'm supposed to think," Zara9 admitted. "That's the point," James said. "Art isn't about understanding. It's about feeling. Some art makes you feel peaceful, some makes you feel excited, some makes you feel confused or angry or sad. The blue rectangles make me feel calm, like looking at a clear sky." Zara9 looked at the painting again, this time trying to focus on their emotional response rather than their analytical assessment. And, gradually, they began to feel something, a sense of expansiveness, of quiet contemplation, of the kind of peace they associated with deep space between star systems. "I think I understand," Zara9 said slowly. "It's about creating experiences that exist purely for their own sake." "Exactly," Diana said. "Humans make art because beauty has value, even when it doesn't serve any practical purpose. Maybe especially when it doesn't serve any practical purpose." They moved through the museum, and Zara9 discovered that human creativity was boundless. Sculptures that defied gravity, photographs that captured single moments of profound emotion, paintings that seemed to contain entire worlds within their frames, installations that transformed simple materials into complex experiences. In front of a particularly intricate piece made from thousands of tiny mirrors arranged in flowing patterns, they encountered another group of museum visitors engaged in the distinctly human activity of art interpretation. "I think it's about fragmentation of the self in modern society," said one woman seriously. "No, it's clearly about the multiplicities of perspective in quantum physics," replied her companion. "You're both wrong," interjected a third person. "It's about disco balls." Zara9 was learning that humans had a remarkable ability to find deep meaning in almost anything, even when the creator might have simply thought mirrors arranged in patterns looked pretty. "Does it matter what the artist actually intended?" Zara9 asked Diana. "Some people think so," Diana replied. "But, I think once art exists in the world, it belongs as much to the people experiencing it as to the person who made it. If you see something meaningful in it, then it has meaning, regardless of what anyone else intended." This was perhaps the most human concept Zara9 had encountered yet, the idea that meaning could be created through interpretation, that value could emerge from the interaction between creator and observer, and that this process was ongoing and personal rather than fixed and universal. They spent another hour in the museum, and Zara 9 found themselves drawn particularly to a section featuring what the placard described as outsider art works created by people who had no formal training but felt compelled to express something that couldn't be expressed any other way. One piece was a massive sculpture made entirely from discarded bottle caps, arranged in intricate patterns that somehow suggested both urban landscapes and natural formations. The artist, according to the description, had been a janitor who spent 40 years collecting bottle caps and arranging them in his basement until his family donated the piece to the museum after his death. He spent 4 decades making something beautiful out of trash, James observed. He never expected anyone to see it. He just needed to make it. This was the essence of human creativity, Zara 9 realized. The drive to create beauty, meaning, and connection, even when no one was watching, even when there was no practical benefit, even when the materials were literally garbage. Humans couldn't help themselves from trying to make the world more interesting, more beautiful, more meaningful than they found it. As they left the museum, Diana suggested one final stop, a small music venue where local performers shared their original compositions. Music might be the most purely human art form, she explained as they walked. It exists only while it's being performed, it has no physical form, and its only purpose is to create emotional and aesthetic experiences. The venue was a small room with a tiny stage, filled with humans sitting at small tables, drinks in hand, attention focused on a young woman with a guitar who was singing about heartbreak, hope, and the particular loneliness of Tuesday afternoons in a big city. Zara 9 listened to the song and realized they were witnessing something profound, one human using organized sound waves to share their internal emotional experience with a room full of other humans, who then responded with their own emotions triggered by recognition of shared experiences. When the song ended, the audience applauded not just for the technical skill of the performance, but for the courage it took to be vulnerable in front of strangers, and for the gift of feeling less alone in their own experiences. The next performer was a man in his 70s who played instrumental pieces on a piano that had clearly seen better decades. His music was complex and beautiful, but, more importantly, it was joyful. He played with the enthusiasm of someone half his age, smiling broadly when he hit difficult passages perfectly and laughing at himself when he didn't. "He's been playing here every Tuesday for 15 years, Diana whispered. "His day job is accounting, but music is what makes him feel alive." As Zara 9 watched this elderly human create beauty purely for the joy of creating it, sharing that joy with strangers who had become friends through weekly musical gatherings, they felt something shift inside themselves. This wasn't just a species worth protecting from extinction. This was a species whose capacity for finding meaning, creating beauty, and building connections in the face of uncertainty was genuinely inspiring. Humans didn't just survive, they thrived through deliberate acts of creation, competition, and community. They turned arbitrary rules into meaningful games, random materials into profound art, and organized sound waves into shared emotional experiences. They did all of this knowing that life was temporary, that failure was inevitable, and that the universe was vast and indifferent to their small concerns. And, somehow, instead of being crushed by this knowledge, they used it as motivation to create more beauty, more meaning, more connection while they had the chance. Sitting in that small music venue, listening to a retired accountant play jazz piano for a room full of friends who had started as strangers, Zara 9 made a decision that would have shocked their alliance supervisors. They weren't just going to save these humans from the asteroid. They were going to figure out how to help them keep being magnificently, irrationally, beautifully human. The asteroid was arriving in 39 hours and 12 minutes. Zara 9 had the technology to redirect it easily. But, first, they wanted to understand one more crucial aspect of human nature, how they handled crisis, fear, and the knowledge of their own mortality. Tomorrow, they would observe humans facing actual danger, making decisions under pressure, and supporting each other when everything seemed impossible. They suspected that what they learned would be the most important lesson of all. 24 hours before the asteroid impact, Zara 9 decided it was time to observe how humans responded to actual emergencies. They didn't have to wait long to find one. At 3:47 p.m., a water main burst on Fifth Avenue, flooding 4 city blocks and trapping dozens of people in building basements. Emergency services responded immediately, but the scope of the problem was massive. This was exactly the kind of crisis situation Zara 9 needed to study. What they witnessed over the next 6 hours challenged every assumption they'd made about human behavior under stress. Zara 9 positioned themselves near the emergency command center, where they could observe both the official response and the spontaneous civilian reaction. The official response was impressive. Firefighters, police, emergency medical technicians, and city engineers all coordinated their efforts with professional efficiency. But the civilian response was something else entirely. Within 30 minutes of the flooding, humans who had no official emergency training and no formal authority began organizing themselves into rescue and support operations that were both completely improvised and remarkably effective. A woman named Rosa, who ran a nearby cafe, immediately converted her business into an emergency shelter and communications center. She started making sandwiches for the rescue workers, set up charging stations for people whose phones were dying, and somehow managed to track which buildings had been evacuated and which still needed help. "I need volunteers to go door to door in the apartment buildings on 47th Street, Rosa announced to anyone within hearing. "We need to make sure everyone got out safely, especially elderly residents who might need help." A group of complete strangers immediately volunteered. They had no training, no equipment, and no idea what they might encounter, but they organized themselves into teams and headed out into potentially dangerous conditions because someone needed help. Zara 9 followed one of these teams, led by a man named Carlos who worked in IT and a woman named Jennifer who taught elementary school. Their team included a college student, a retired librarian, and someone who appeared to be a professional dog walker, judging by the 5 dogs he'd refused to abandon. "Okay," Carlos said as they approached the first building. "Jennifer and I will check the lower floors since we're fastest on stairs. Margaret, you stay here with the dogs and coordinate with anyone who comes out. Tommy, you check with the building super to get a list of residents. Sarah, you're our runner. If we need supplies or help, you sprint back to Rosa's command center." This group of strangers had instantly created a functional hierarchy based on their individual capabilities, assigned roles that matched their strengths, and developed a communication system. They did all of this without any formal training or authority, simply because the situation required organization and they were the people present to provide it. As they worked their way through the building, Zara 9 observed remarkable acts of practical heroism. When they found an elderly man named Mr. Chin who was afraid to leave his apartment because he couldn't carry his medications down 4 flights of stairs, Jennifer immediately offered to carry his medication bag while Carlos helped him navigate the stairs. "What about my cat?" Mr. Chin asked. "I can't leave Whiskers." "We'll get Whiskers," Jennifer assured him. "Carlos, can you handle Mr. Chin while I catch a cat?" "I've never caught a cat before," Carlos admitted. "I have," said the dog walker, who had somehow appeared in the hallway with 3 of his dogs. "Cats are just small dogs with attitude problems." 10 minutes later, they had successfully evacuated Mr. Chen, his medications, and one extremely indignant cat named Whiskers. The operation required no paperwork, no authorization, and no special equipment, just human adaptability and the willingness to solve problems as they arose. But what impressed Zara 9 most wasn't the efficiency of the rescue operation. It was the way humans maintained their essential humanity even in crisis situations. While carrying Mr. Chen's medication bag, Jennifer discovered he was worried about his grandson's birthday party, which was supposed to happen that weekend. "He's turning 7, Mr. Chen explained sadly. "I was going to make his favorite dumplings. Now I don't even know if my kitchen will be okay." "What kind of dumplings?" Jennifer asked. "Pork and chive. My grandmother's recipe." "I make pretty good dumplings," Carlos chimed in. "If your kitchen isn't ready by the weekend, we could do the party at my place. I've got a big kitchen." This conversation was happening while they navigated flooded streets during an active emergency, but somehow these humans found it perfectly natural to plan birthday parties for a 7-year-old they'd never met. They weren't just solving the immediate crisis, they were thinking ahead to preserve the small joys that made life meaningful. Back at Rosa's Cafe Command Center, Zara 9 observed the larger pattern of human emergency response. The space had become a complex operations center where information was constantly flowing, resources were being coordinated, and problems were being solved through a combination of formal expertise and creative improvisation. A teenager named Alex had appointed himself the social media coordinator, using his phone to maintain a constantly updated list of which streets were safe, which buildings had been cleared, and where people could find food, shelter, or help. He was cross-referencing official emergency broadcasts with real-time reports from civilians in the field, creating a more accurate and current information source than any single official agency. The fire department says 48th Street is clear, but Miguel just texted that there's still water rushing out of a storefront, Alex announced. I'm updating the map to show that block is still dangerous. Rosa, meanwhile, was performing logistics miracles. She had somehow organized a supply chain that included donated food from nearby restaurants, borrowed tables and chairs from a furniture store, medical supplies from a pharmacy whose owner had opened his emergency stock, and bedding from residents who had brought extra blankets and pillows from their apartments. We need more coffee, Rosa called out. The rescue workers have been going for 6 hours straight. I've got coffee, replied a man Zara 9 hadn't seen before. Industrial strength from my office building. I'll bring the machine too. I've got cream and sugar, added a woman with a baby strapped to her chest. And some of those little stirrer things. Within 20 minutes, a complete coffee service had been established by people who had never met before but somehow managed to coordinate their efforts seamlessly. But perhaps the most remarkable thing Zara 9 witnessed was how humans maintained their sense of humor even in genuinely dangerous situations. When a rescue worker emerged from a flooded basement covered head to toe in muddy water, instead of focusing on the misery of his condition, the crowd at the command center immediately started joking about his appearance. Did you fall in or did the flood come up to say hello? Rosa asked with a grin. The water was very friendly, the rescue worker replied, playing along. It wanted to give me a complete makeover. Well, it definitely achieved that goal, Jennifer added. You look like you've been wrestling with a swamp monster. I think the swamp monster won, the man said, wringing muddy water out of his shirt. Everyone laughed, including the rescue worker himself. But this wasn't callous indifference to his discomfort, it was a way of acknowledging the difficulty of the situation while refusing to let it overwhelm their spirits. The jokes were actually a form of emotional support, a way of saying we see that this is hard, but we're all in it together, and we're going to find ways to stay positive. As evening approached, Zara 9 realized they were witnessing something extraordinary, a community that had formed spontaneously in response to crisis, created its own organizational structure, developed efficient systems for resource distribution and communication, and maintained high morale through humor and mutual support, all while actually solving the immediate problems that had brought them together. This wasn't survival in the grim, desperate sense that Zara 9 had observed in other species facing emergencies. This was creative adaptation that somehow made the humans stronger and more connected than they had been before the crisis began. Around 9 p.m., when the immediate emergency was largely under control and most people had been evacuated safely, Rosa made an announcement. We're going to keep this space open as a community center for anyone who needs help dealing with flood damage. And, since we've all gotten to know each other today, I'm declaring this the unofficial neighborhood headquarters for any future emergencies. A cheer went up from the room, and people immediately began making plans. Alex volunteered to maintain the social media communication network they'd developed. Carlos offered to coordinate volunteer work crews for cleanup and repairs. Jennifer suggested organizing a potluck dinner for the following weekend where everyone could share stories about the day and continue building the community connections they discovered. We should do this every month, suggested the dog walker, who was now somehow in charge of coordinating pet care for displaced residents. Not the emergency part, obviously. But the coming together part. Turns out we're pretty good at taking care of each other when we actually try. As Zara 9 listened to these plans, they realized they were witnessing something that no alliance protocol had prepared them for, humans who had been made stronger, not weaker, by facing difficulty together. The emergency hadn't just brought out their survival instincts, it had revealed their capacity for creating meaning, community, and joy even in challenging circumstances. Late that evening, after most of the crowd had dispersed, Zara 9 found themselves in conversation with Rosa as she cleaned up the cafe. Excuse me, Zara9 said, having decided to drop their invisibility completely. I've been observing what happened here today, and I'm curious about something. Rosa looked up from the table she was wiping down and showed no surprise at encountering a 7-foot-tall blue person. After the day she'd had, apparently nothing seemed particularly strange anymore. "What's your question?" she asked. "Why did you do all this? You had no obligation to help. You could have evacuated and waited for official emergency services to handle everything." Rosa considered this seriously. "I suppose I could have. But, look, when something bad happens, you've got a choice. You can focus on protecting what's yours, or you can focus on taking care of what's ours. Today, all these people became ours. The neighborhood became ours. The problem became ours. And, when you're dealing with our problems, you find solutions you'd never think of when you're just protecting your stuff. But, how did you know it would work? How did you know people would help?" "I didn't know," Rosa admitted. "But, I hoped. And, hoping is sometimes enough to get started. Once you start, other people see what you're doing and they want to help too. Humans like being useful. We like feeling like we matter. Crisis gives us a chance to matter in obvious ways." As Rosa finished cleaning and locked up her cafe, Zara9 found themselves thinking about hope as a practical strategy for problem solving. Humans didn't just hope that things would get better, they used hope as motivation to make things better, even when they couldn't guarantee success. Walking through the quiet streets where evidence of the day's emergency was still visible, Zara9 reflected on what they had learned. When faced with genuine danger, humans didn't become selfish, panicked, or helpless. Instead, they became more creative, more generous, and more connected to each other. They turned crisis into community. They transformed problems into opportunities for cooperation. They maintained their sense of humor, their concern for others, and their ability to plan for future joy even while dealing with immediate difficulties. The asteroid would arrive in 18 hours and 7 minutes. Zara9 had the technology to redirect it with minimal effort. But, they were no longer thinking about this as a simple rescue operation. These humans didn't just deserve to be saved from extinction. They deserved to know that someone had witnessed their remarkable capacity for hope, creativity, and care under pressure. They deserved to understand that their beautiful, chaotic, generous way of being alive was not only worth preserving, it was genuinely inspiring to beings from across the galaxy. Tomorrow, when Zara9 saved the world, they weren't going to do it quietly. They were going to make sure humanity knew exactly why they were worth saving. And, if the Alliance didn't approve of their methods, well, Zara9 had learned something important from watching humans face emergencies. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to ignore the official protocols and focus on taking care of what matters most. What mattered most was making sure these remarkable people got to keep being remarkably people for as long as possible. At exactly 11:47 a.m. on Friday morning, every electronic device on Earth simultaneously displayed the same message: "Please don't panic, but you should probably look up." Zara9 had spent considerable time crafting this announcement. They'd rejected dozens of more formal alternatives in favor of something that sounded appropriately human, slightly apologetic, mildly humorous, and designed to get attention without causing mass hysteria. Within 30 seconds, 7 billion humans were outside, looking up at the sky where a massive asteroid, visible even in daylight, hung suspended motionless about 50,000 miles above the Earth's surface. It should have been moving at tremendous speed toward a catastrophic impact. Instead, it was just sitting there, as if someone had pressed pause on the end of the world. That's when Zara9 materialized in Times Square, exactly where they had arrived 4 days earlier, except this time they weren't trying to hide. "Hello, Earth," Zara9 announced, their voice somehow amplified to be heard clearly by everyone in the immediate area while simultaneously being broadcast through every communication device on the planet. "My name is Zara9, and I'm from the Cosmic Protection Alliance. I need to talk to you about that rock in the sky." The crowd in Times Square stared in stunned silence. This was not how anyone had expected their Friday to go. Zara9 continued, "So here's the situation. That asteroid was supposed to hit your planet about 6 minutes ago, which would have ended most life on Earth. I stopped it because, frankly, you people are way too entertaining to let go extinct. But, before I explain how we're going to fix this problem permanently, I need to tell you what I've learned about humanity this week, because it's the most important thing that's ever happened to me in 300 years of cosmic service. Around the world, humans stood transfixed. This was either the most elaborate hoax in history or actual first contact with alien life. Either way, it was definitely more interesting than their usual Friday morning routines. I was sent here to save you, Zara 9 explained, but I wasn't supposed to interact with you. I was supposed to complete my mission quickly and, quietly, leaving you none the wiser. That plan failed spectacularly on Tuesday morning when I witnessed two businessmen engage in philosophical combat over mustard preferences. In Times Square, several people started laughing nervously. Around the world, millions more had the same reaction. The aliens' account of the hot dog incident was both absurd enough to be believable and specific enough to feel real. That was my first clue that humans are unlike any species I'd previously encountered, Zara 9 continued. Most civilizations, when facing extinction, focus on survival preparations. You people were debating condiment choices. It was magnificent. Zara 9 gestured to the crowd around them. So I decided to study you more carefully. And what I discovered changed everything I thought I knew about intelligent life. This was the moment Zara 9 had been planning since deciding to abandon Alliance protocols. They were going to give humanity the gift of seeing themselves through alien eyes and hopefully help them understand just how remarkable they actually were. Here's what makes humans special, Zara 9 announced. You've created a civilization based not on efficiency or survival or conquest, but on the radical idea that life should be interesting. You've built entire industries around making each other laugh. You've invented games with no purpose except to give yourselves opportunities to hope, cheer, and occasionally despair in controlled, entertaining ways. In the crowd, Zara 9 could see people starting to smile. This wasn't the solemn first contact scenario anyone had imagined from science fiction. This was an alien who seemed genuinely delighted by human nature. You've turned the simple act of consuming nutrients into cuisine, art, and social bonding experiences. You've created music, which serves no survival purpose whatsoever but somehow makes your lives infinitely richer. You've domesticated animals not for practical reasons, but because you enjoy their company so much that you're willing to spend vast resources just to have them around. The crowd was definitely warming up now. People were nodding, laughing, and looking at each other with the kind of recognition that comes from hearing yourself accurately described by someone who clearly understands you. But, here's the most amazing thing about humans, Zara 9 continued, their voice becoming more earnest. When crisis strikes, when everything goes wrong, when you're faced with problems you've never encountered before, you don't just survive. You become more human. You become more generous, more creative, more connected to each other. Zara 9 thought about the flood response they'd witnessed, the spontaneous community that had formed around Rose's cafe, the strangers who had instantly become a rescue team. Yesterday, I watched your species respond to an emergency by immediately organizing volunteer operations, sharing resources with strangers, making jokes to keep spirits up, and planning birthday parties for children you'd never met. You turned a disaster into a community-building exercise. You made crisis into an opportunity for connection. The crowd in Times Square was now completely engaged. Around the world, humans were having the surreal experience of being praised by an alien for traits they'd never thought of as particularly special. So here's my question, Zara 9 said, looking around at the sea of upturned faces. Do you want to keep being human? Because I can offer you something better. My technology could solve all your problems. No more natural disasters, no more diseases, no more conflicts over resources. I could make your lives perfect, safe, and efficient. The crowd waited. This sounded like the kind of offer that was too good to be true, which meant there was definitely a catch. But, Zara 9 continued with a grin, if I did that, you wouldn't be human anymore. You'd be optimized. And, optimized beings don't spend 30 minutes choosing between identical black blazers because one feels more Tuesday-ish. Optimized beings don't gather in groups to watch other beings hit balls with sticks. Optimized beings definitely don't create global communication networks primarily for sharing pictures of cats wearing tiny hats. The laughter from the crowd was growing louder and more widespread. Around the world, people were recognizing themselves in these descriptions and finding them oddly flattering when presented from an alien perspective. So instead, Zara 9 announced, "I'm going to make you a different offer. I'm going to move this asteroid to a safe distance where it can become Earth's second moon. I'm going to give you some basic technology that will help you solve problems when you need to, but won't eliminate the interesting challenges that make you who you are. And then, I'm going to stick around, if you'll have me, because watching humans be human is the best entertainment in the galaxy." This was Zara 9's real plan. Not just to save Earth, but to become Earth's unofficial cultural ambassador to the cosmos. They had already composed their report to the Alliance, mission successful. Primitive species saved from extinction. Request extended assignment for ongoing protection and cultural study. What they didn't mention in their official report was that they'd fallen in love with humanity's beautiful chaos and had no intention of leaving. "I should warn you," Zara 9 continued, "that news of your existence is going to spread throughout the galaxy. Other species are going to want to meet you. Some will be friendly, some will be curious, and some will probably try to sell you things you don't need. But I'll be here to help you navigate those relationships, and to make sure everyone understands that humans are under cosmic protection." The crowd was buzzing with excitement now. First contact wasn't turning out to be the terrifying invasion scenario from science fiction movies. Instead, they were apparently getting a guardian alien who appreciated their quirks and wanted to help them deal with cosmic neighbors. "But here's the most important thing," Zara 9 said, their voice becoming more serious. "Don't change. Don't try to become what you think aliens want you to be. Don't lose your beautiful inefficiency, your magnificent obsessions, your talent for finding meaning in arbitrary things. The galaxy needs more joy, more creativity, more hope, and more laughter. You have all of those in abundance." Zara 9 gestured toward the asteroid, still hanging motionless in the sky. "Watch this." With a casual wave of their hand, the massive rock began moving slowly away from Earth, following a new trajectory that would establish it in a stable orbit. As it moved, it began to sparkle with embedded lights that Zara 9 had installed as a surprise. "Your new moon comes with a light show," Zara 9 explained with obvious pride. "It'll change patterns based on your seasons, your holidays, and occasionally just when I think you need something pretty to look at. Consider it a cosmic night light." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Around the world, humans were stepping outside to watch their new moon settle into orbit, displaying a spectacular pattern of lights that somehow spelled out "Welcome to the galactic community" in letters large enough to be seen from the surface. "Now," Zara 9 said as the cheering died down, "I know you have questions. Thousands of questions. But before we get into the technical details about galactic politics and advanced technology, I want to address the most important question first." The crowd waited expectantly. "Yes," Zara 9 said with a perfectly straight face, "mustard is actually a perfectly reasonable condiment, and anyone who thinks otherwise is objectively wrong. The Cosmic Protection Alliance has official policies about this." The laughter that erupted from Times Square was heard around the world. And, in that moment, humanity realized that their new alien friend wasn't just protecting them from cosmic threats, they were validating their right to have passionate opinions about completely arbitrary subjects. Over the following hours, as Zara 9 fielded questions from reporters, scientists, world leaders, and random curious humans, it became clear that this was going to be a very different kind of first contact experience.